Module 2.8, Map your team and individuals' motivation. So now that we've looked into how do you set up your environment, the culture for your studio, so really things at a high level for your team and your responsibility as a team lead, it is point like now to the question of how do you map your team and particularly individuals' motivation aligned with the mission of the studio. And if you are not familiar with the self-determination theory, this is a concept we have been actually using quite a lot in games when we look at intrinsic motivation of players. This model is actually a model about human motivations. So why not applying the thinking of it to your team? How do you keep a team motivated in the long term and individuals? And behind the concept of self-determination theory, there are three pillars. So first one is competence, the feeling of competence. In some other form of model, we call it mastery. And it's really about the feeling of satisfaction when you get things done and developing the self. So constant feeling of progress, which is part of a human intrinsic motivation in anything you do. Then the second pillar is about autonomy. So it's about the feeling of ownership, that you have the capacity, even the skills, the knowledge, the context, the environment to do what you want to do. And it touches also the context and information, transparency, what you have, or the feeling of trust. And the third pillar is relatedness. So it's about the recognition and appreciation from the game team or from players and the feeling of making an impact. And these three pillars are what, for each human individuals, are the intrinsic motivations to keep you motivated inside to do things in the long term. So as a contrast, for example, extrinsic motivation, like money, gifts, materials, are not what will feed you for the long term. And these are the three things that will inspire you, keep you intrinsically motivated in the long term. And maybe these days, as we think about relatedness, I think a bigger need that I have seen in humans, in people in the workplace, is a sense of purpose. And that's maybe the way you can think about it for the last pillar about relatedness. What is the sense of purpose that is brought in your team, by your studio, in what you're doing? And let's go in details through each one. So first, feeling of competence. So behind the competence is, of course, feeling that you're in the right place to do the right thing. And an important aspect of that and a step to make sure that you have people who are here in the right place to do the right things is hiring. So I dedicated my first masterclass really going in details about hiring, what is important when you hire, making sure that the motivation of the people or how they can progress is aligned with what your studio has to offer. That's an important step to make sure that the competence, the feeling of competence happen for each individual. And then later is development talks. And I will talk about it in further masterclass. So my third masterclass season that will come next, in going really into details about how do you develop people, how do you run the development talks. But not for this masterclass, but that's definitely a big part of how you make people feel they are making progress through their career, through their work, through what they're doing with work and with others. Then you have a mission card that clarifies the roles and responsibility and how and where the person should progress. So this is what helps also to give development goals for each individual and for them to reflect if they are making progress in the direction that what is expected in the studio. And at last, task assignment. And this is, I would say, in the collaboration of team members and either the craft lead, so let's say, for example, a tech lead or an art lead or the team lead, to make sure that you are doing or you are working on the projects that is aligned with where are your skills as an individual. So all of these components together is what will create the feeling of competence of an individual in the team. Are they in the right team? Are they on the right project? Are they on the right tasks? And do they have clear goals and measure of success in what they're doing? That's what you want to create in your environment to give a feeling of competence for individuals. And second is about the feeling of autonomy. So autonomy is really about the agency of doing things that you wish to do. You have a capacity, you have an environment, and you have the skills to do what you want to do. So first, as we have addressed the topic earlier, it's really important to have a good autonomy is to have also a clear view on who is responsible for what and who does what in the team, so you get the full autonomy in the area, in the space where you are responsible or accountable for. And then second, to be autonomous, it requires to have very clear processes. So what is in the processes supported by the studio and what is not. So then you can differentiate of what is maybe out of the processes supported and maybe to be more cautious or have a question mark, should I even be doing that? And the things that are supported by the studio, part of the processes, and then you can operate fully with full freedom in this box that has been defined. And related to the box I just talked about that is defined, the mission, of course, is really important. So autonomy really touches the how. Do I have full freedom as an individual on the how, as long as it's clearly defined the what, like where I'm supposed to go as an individual and why I'm doing this. And if all that is clearly defined and shared inside the team, then there's a lot of autonomy on the how. How do I get there? How do I get to the result? And at last, for autonomy to happen, it's really important as well to give a maximum of context and transparency. For people to be able to make a very good decision by themselves on areas that either is in the craft or at the side of the craft, the more they have context, understanding of what they're doing and towards what and why, the better the decision they can make efficiently without the intervention of the lead or other parties to help make the decision. And I'll go more in details about the part of context and transparency in this masterclass. And last, relatedness and purpose. So what makes this relatedness and purpose inside a team? First, I would say weekly retrospective is the best way to create relatedness in the team because you have a direct feedback and impact of what you've been doing as an individual, how it impacted other parties, the team, the project, the deadlines, and you have a direct feedback to reflect on what you've been doing. I would say this is the best way in an interdependent way to get feedback from each other. And second, you have kudos and praise. So find a way in your team to have a system where people will give each other kudos and praise publicly or in private. What is the environment you're creating for people to give each other kudos? It's really important. Well, for example, in a retrospective, we talk a lot about the things we need to improve. What is the space you can create for people also to say big thank you, face-to-face, or giving the praise to certain people during the week to congratulate on the work? And I would say it shouldn't always come from the lead. It's even better when it comes from peers to peers. Performance feedback is another way to also get a big sense of relatedness and in the value of the work you're doing. So performance feedback is under the responsibility of a team lead. And this is a whole section for itself because it's a pretty big topic of how do you give performance feedback. It's related also to development talks, and I will actually make it a whole topic in my third masterclass. But for now, you get the idea that through performance feedback, this is the best way as well to give direct feedback and feeling of relatedness in the work that people are doing. And I would say the best and a high-level way, don't wait for 6 months and your review to give feedback to people. Make it in your one-on-one or make it out of your one-on-one when you see something that deserves either a great appreciation or a correction. And by making it regular, this is how people will feel valued for the work they're doing. They're being listened, their work matters, and you are observing it and you are paying attention to it, and they feel like there is really a loop of feedback. So there's a lot of work around it. And last, but not the least, impact on players. So this is, I would say, the thing that gives the most sense of purpose actually in a team. What are you doing in your game development that not only impacts your team, but impacts the players, the audience in the games you're making? What is the message you're bringing? What is the value you add to the world? And this is the most inspiring thing that as a team you can talk about and really foster all the creativity around, because this is the most meaningful thing you can do through games. How does it impact others? And I want to share here examples of how we've been doing the work around relatedness. Here, for example, we have been doing quarterly and yearly reviews. So every quarter or once a year, we go through all the things that have happened and we do a big review. And this is a bit different from a retrospective where you have a very short-term picture of what has happened. Here it's really high level. What are the big highlights, the big learnings, the big things we have learned as a team, we grew from and we should continue or stop doing, and what should we change out of that? And this is also a big moment to give each other big kudos, big praise, or even realization of all the things we've done for a quarter or for a year that are great and sometimes we forget to mention. And also reflection are really important. And this is, for example, the types I use on Notion. So again, as a team, we use a lot Notion for documentation. And very regularly, I love to do studio reflection. So it could be about a quarter, about the goals we have for the quarter, the postmortem. So we don't wait for a game to be killed to do a postmortem. Sometimes feature development or feature shipping have gone wrong, and we do a postmortem also about it. Workshops. We have every month, for example, a monthly digest where I go through the big news of the studio, things to come, where people can ask questions and interact. And this is also the best way to give a space for people to give and receive feedback, for us to reflect on the things we've been doing as well. AMA as well is one practice I have in the team where every 2 weeks we have a product AMA. And we just go through questions that people have, and this is also best practice for leads or even myself to be quite open about what's happening. Again, continue to give context, transparency, and feedback. And praise. This is also a tool we've been using internally at Vodou. Lattice is to give public and private praise. And this is a very powerful tool. So by the system, you can set up a routine when somebody onboarded. There's a reminder for whoever is concerned 2 weeks after the person joined. What is the feedback and the praise you would like to give to the person? A month after, every 2-3 months, there's a nudge or reminder like, hey, it's been a while, you haven't given a praise about that person. Maybe it's the time to give feedback. So this is a good tool if you don't want to think too hard about it, to remind you through the system of Lattice to give each other feedback inside a team. And you can make it public or private. And the last, most powerful thing I love is bringing players' feedback to the sense of relatedness and purpose of what you're doing inside the team. So for example, that was a player's feedback about how the person was touched about the effort and the level of details and work we put into the game. And I share that with the team, and everyone is really like touched by it. And another one that really touched us recently was really how the game has affected the life of that player. She just came back from a brain surgery, and I had no idea that our game could, really relieve the life in that way of certain players, and really encouraging us to continue. And this feedback means a lot to us because it gives us meaning, and we are not just making a game, another game out there in the market. We are making an experience with a lot of intent that some players have received and that has impacted their lives in some way. And that's great to connect this with the work we're doing every day. So to summarize, when you think of building the motivation in your team, think about these 3 pillars, and are they all met for each of your individuals? Do they have a feeling of competence and mastery in what they're doing? Second, do they have a feeling of autonomy in what they're doing? Do they understand what they need to do and can they do it? And then third, do they have a sense of purpose and relatedness, or what is the impact in what they're doing and how does it relate to others? Map it and design it for your team.